I have $5 in my pocket and nowhere left to go." The words tore out of Lena Voss before she could stop them, her voice cracking like glass under pressure. November rain hammered the luxury hotel entrance, cold water pooling around her borrowed shoes, 2 sizes too large, stuffed with newspaper to keep them from falling off, neon hotel sign bleeding red across wet pavement. Catherine Mercer stood under the gold-trimmed awning in a cream Chanel suit, diamond bracelet catching light as she jabbed one manicured finger at Lena's chest. The finger stopped 3 inches from her ribs, close enough to feel like a weapon. "You think I don't know what you are?" A homeless delivery girl playing nanny. "Security found your eviction notice in the staff locker. 12 days stamped in red ink. You lied on your application." Behind Catherine, hotel owner Richard Brennan nodded, his thick arms crossed over his barrel chest, his expression the blank cruelty of a man who had stopped seeing the people he destroyed. And behind them both, pressed against the lobby glass so hard his breath fogged the surface, Oliver, 6 years old, dark-eyed, trembling, watched his nanny being dismantled in front of him. His small mouth opened and closed without sound, then the sound came, a whimper so fragile it seemed to break the rain itself. Lena's hand shook as she clutched the photograph, the only thing that survived the fire 3 days ago. Her own son. 7 years old. Still in the apartment when the flames took everything. The edges of the photograph were singed brown, the corner curled like a burned leaf, and her fingerprints had stained it with ash and salt water. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Please, Mrs. Mercer. I need this job. I've been studying criminal justice at night. I can get out before I call the police." The words landed like a physical blow. Catherine turned away, her heels clicking against marble, and Richard Brennan followed, not bothering to look back. Lena stood alone in the downpour, the $5 bill crumpling in her pocket, the eviction notice with its red ink deadline burning like a brand in her memory. 12 days. 188 hours until everything changed. But what neither of them knew, what no one could have known as that November night deepened around them, was that a black convoy had just turned onto the hotel street. The lead SUV moved without hurry, deliberate, the kind of slow that meant power so absolute it never needed to rush. And the man inside that vehicle, watching the entire scene unfold through rain-streaked windows, was Lucian Calabrese. He was tall, 6'2", with shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of Miami's underworld the way other men carried briefcases. His tailored suit cost $15,000, charcoal gray, made by a tailor in Milan who had never met him but who understood the kind of man he was through the precision of his measurements. His shirt was open at the collar, revealing a chest marked by a thin silver chain and old scars that belonged to a younger version of himself. His hair was dark, almost black, silvered at the temples like the edges of a blade, and his eyes were the color of a storm rolling across the Atlantic, gray, cold, penetrating, with a kind of absolute stillness behind them that made men confess their sins without being asked. There was a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin as a wire, barely visible in most light. Tonight, in the red neon glow of the hotel sign, it looked like it was still bleeding. Rocco, his oldest lieutenant, sat in the passenger seat. Rocco was a narrow man, grey at the temples, with hands that had learned violence before they learned anything else, and his eyes moved constantly, cataloguing exits, threats, weaknesses. When Lucian's gaze fixed on the scene outside, on the woman standing alone in the rain, shoulders curved inward like a question mark, holding a photograph, Rocco did not need to ask questions. He knew that look. He had seen it once before, 15 years ago, and it had changed everything. Lucian did not move. He did not speak. He simply watched as Catherine Mercer disappeared into the hotel, as Richard Brennan followed like a dog trained to obey, as the small boy pressing his face against the glass began to cry with the specific desperation of a child losing someone he loved. And then Lena Voss looked up. The rain was falling hard enough to blur the world, but somehow her eyes found the black SUV. She could not see inside. But she could feel the weight of being watched, the sensation of a gaze so focused it became tangible, pressing against her skin like a hand. She turned away. She had 300 yards to walk before she reached the highway where her scooter was parked, and the engine had been making a sound like a dying animal for the past week. She had $112 left in her apartment, scattered across 3 different hiding places, each dollar accounted for in a ledger she kept hidden inside her pillowcase. $37 for electricity. $12 for phone. $42 for food. $21 for the bus pass she would need to get to her night classes at Miami Central, where she was 1 semester away from her criminal justice degree, where she studied at 3 in the morning in booths at the Sunrise Diner, nursing a single coffee for 4 hours while the manager pretended not to notice. But now the job was gone. The $300 a week that had been keeping her alive was gone. And with it, everything she had been building disappeared like ash in the wind. The engine of Lena's scooter coughed like a dying animal at exactly 8:47 p.m. She was 2 miles from the hotel, riding through rain that fell in sheets, a delivery bag strapped to her back containing the last order of the night, a shrimp pad thai and an order of sautéed chicken going to a penthouse in the financial district. The customer had not answered his phone in 15 minutes, which meant either he was not home or he was home and had forgotten he ordered food. Both scenarios meant no tip. Both scenarios meant she had driven 7 miles for exactly $0. Her scooter groaned as she accelerated through an amber light, water spraying up from the wheels, soaking her legs. She was wearing a uniform that belonged to someone else, a friend who worked at the restaurant, 2 sizes larger, with the cuffs rolled up and the waistband safety pinned at the side to keep it from sliding off her frame. Under the uniform, she wore a tank top with a hole in the shoulder. Under that, skin covering bones that had learned not to expect enough food to be properly nourished. She was 27 years old but looked 35. Her hair was dark, pulled back into a braid so tight it pulled the skin at her temples, and her eyes were brown, the color of wet earth, with a particular kind of emptiness that came from learning that hoping for better things was a waste of energy. She did not open the email. She already knew what it said. She had missed the tuition payment. Again. Her apartment building was a brown structure with a mansard roof that had begun to rot. The elevator had been broken since September. She climbed 4 flights of stairs and unlocked a door that had 3 separate locks, all of which she had installed herself because the landlord, a man named Vasquez who lived in a house in Coral Gables and never visited his properties, did not believe in maintaining anything. The apartment was a single room with a kitchenette, a bathroom with a toilet that ran constantly, and a window that overlooked a parking lot where police lights flashed at least twice a week. Her son's photograph hung above her bed on the only wall space not covered with study notes. Noah. Age 7. In the photograph, he was smiling, his mouth open wide, his eyes bright with something that had died out of the world around him. The photograph was taken 4 years ago, before he had learned that his mother could not protect him from anything, before he had learned that loving someone meant losing them, before he had learned that there was no such thing as safety. Noah lived with her mother in Nashville because Lena could not afford to keep him with her. It cost money to keep a child alive, and she did not have money. She had sent $243 last month, every penny she had saved after her own expenses, and he had written her a letter in his careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Mommy, when are you coming home? Grandma says you are working hard. When will you be not working so hard? I miss you." The letter was in a plastic sleeve on her bedside table, and she read it every night before sleep, which meant she did not sleep much anymore. She was eating a can of beans standing over the sink when her phone rang. The number calling was the hotel where she had just been hired 3 weeks ago. She answered on the second ring. The voice on the phone belonged to the hotel manager, a woman named Patricia who usually called with simple instructions: bring the child to the gym at 4 p.m. Make sure he wears his shoes. Do not let him speak to strangers. But today her voice was different. Today it was thin, nervous, careful. "Lena, I need you to come back to the hotel. Mrs. Mercer is here. She wants to speak with you about the position." Catherine Mercer was the woman who had hired her. Catherine Mercer was a woman who carried herself like she had never once doubted her right to exist, who wore clothes that cost what Lena earned in 6 months, who had asked only one question during the interview: "You have references?" Lena had lied. She had given 3 phone numbers, and she had called 3 friends and told them exactly what to say if anyone called. All 3 numbers checked out. Catherine Mercer had hired her. What does she want? Lena asked. Just come back. She's with Mr. Brennan. They're waiting in the lobby. The bus ride to the hotel took 41 minutes. The rain had gotten worse. By the time she arrived, she was soaked through, her borrowed clothes clinging to her body, and something in her chest had begun to tighten like a fist. She could feel it then, the sensation of the world about to shift, the knowledge that something was about to break, the particular dread of a person who had learned that when authority figures wanted to see you, it was never good news. She walked into the lobby at 11:32 p.m. Catherine Mercer was standing by the windows, looking out at the rain with the expression of a woman observing something beneath her notice. Richard Brennan stood beside her, his bulk taking up space the way powerful people did, as if the world owed him room to exist. And Oliver, 6 years old, with his mother's dark hair and a face that still believed in the goodness of the adults around him, was being held by a hotel security guard while his small hands reached toward Lena. "Miss Voss," Catherine said, turning from the window, and that was when Lena saw her expression shift. That was when Catherine Mercer looked at her with the specific cruelty of someone who had discovered something delicious, a weakness, a lie, a vulnerability to exploit. What happened next was something no one in the hotel could have predicted. The black and white checkered floor of Sal's diner stretched beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like dying wasps, and Lena Voss sat in the corner booth with her criminal justice textbook open to a chapter on witness protection, her highlighter frozen over a sentence she had read 4 times without absorbing a single word. The clock above the counter read 3:47 in the morning. Outside, November rain hammered the windows with the persistence of something demanding entry, and the diner smelled like stale coffee and grease that had been frying since the previous century. She was alone. The red vinyl booth stretching into shadow held no other customers, and Marlene, the night waitress with silver streaking her dark hair, moved behind the counter with the tired efficiency of someone who had stopped expecting anything good from life. Her phone pinged. Another delivery order. $3.50. Lena pulled out the crumpled bills from her pocket and spread them across the table like a tarot reading of her own destruction. $127. Rent was $950. The eviction notice with its red-stamped deadline, 12 days away, sat folded in her jacket pocket, a small piece of paper carrying the weight of a funeral announcement. She had checked the math 17 times. 17 times, she had counted and recounted, hoping the numbers would rearrange themselves into something survivable. They never did. Marlene appeared with the coffee pot, and the smell of it rose up like a small mercy. "Still here at 3 in the morning, honey? You're gonna burn out." Her voice carried the particular kindness of someone who recognized desperation because she wore it herself. "Can't afford to," Lena said. She was 28 years old but looked 35, the kind of aging that poverty inscribed on a person's face like words carved into stone. Dark hair pulled back in a braid that had seen better days. Eyes that were grey-green but dulled by exhaustion. Her hands wrapped around the coffee cup bore calluses from delivering food in rain and cold, and a faint bruise on her left wrist, 3 months old now, had faded to the color of old tea. The coffee was bitter and hot and exactly what she needed. She highlighted another line, victim credibility assessment, chains of evidence, the legal standard for proving intimidation. Somewhere in this textbook was a future where she was not counting her rent in a diner at 3:47 in the morning. Somewhere in these pages was an escape. She had been enrolled in criminal justice for 2 years. Online courses between shifts. Night classes she had to leave early because Oliver's daycare cost $42 per day and she worked every hour she could find. The degree would take 4 more years. 4 more years of this. The thought moved through her chest like ice water. At 11:53 p.m., her phone had pinged with a delivery order from the Grand View Hotel, a 4-star establishment where the lobby smelled like fresh flowers and expensive perfume and where people checked in without checking their bank balances. The order was for the penthouse. A single chicken salad and a bottle of water. The tip might be $5. The tip might be nothing. She loaded her scooter outside the diner, a 2008 Yamaha that coughed and sputtered like an old man with pneumonia. The rain had intensified since she arrived. Not gentle November rain, but something vicious, something personal, as if the sky itself had decided that tonight was the night to punish her for the sin of existing. She zipped her jacket, borrowed from a friend, 2 sizes too large, and pulled the hood down over her face. The first delivery was an apartment complex in Alapata, as by the time she finished the deliveries, the rain had become something biblical. Water ran down the streets in rivers. The traffic lights reflected off the wet pavement like neon jellyfish floating through the dark. She pulled into the gas station on 8th Avenue to fill her scooter tank, her hands already trembling from cold and hunger. She had not eaten since 6 in the morning, had given her lunch to Oliver instead, and that was when she saw the silver Lexus pull up 3 pumps over. Her entire body went rigid. Derek Collins stepped out of the Lexus like a man who had never experienced the concept of doubt. 6'2", gymnasium muscles that he maintained like a shrine to his own importance, expensive watch catching the neon light of the gas station sign. He had been her boyfriend for 3 years. He had left her apartment, the one she was about to lose, with his fist through her bedroom wall and his final threat hanging in the air like smoke: "You will never convince anyone to believe you." He walked toward her. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Lena," he said. "Still playing delivery girl? You know you can end this. Come back. I'll forget about the restraining order you tried to file." The restraining order that the police had never processed because Derek had called a lieutenant he knew, a man he had worked with in his construction company, a man who understood the code of protecting your friends more than protecting women who made accusations. The order had vanished into bureaucratic silence. "Stay away from me, Derek." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, like wind through broken glass. He leaned closer, and she could smell his cologne, expensive, cloying, mixing with the gasoline smell of the station. "I know where Oliver's daycare is. I know you're 3 weeks behind on his care. I'm just trying to help you." He left the threat hanging there, did not need to finish it. They both understood what he meant. "I know where your son is. I know you cannot protect him. I know you are weak and alone and desperate." He walked back to his Lexus slowly, deliberately, in no rush, because men like Derek never rushed. Men like Derek moved through the world with the confidence of people who had never faced real consequences. He drove away with his window down, rain spraying across the leather interior of a car that cost more than Lena's annual salary. Her hand shook so violently that she dropped the gas pump. It clattered against the concrete, and the attendant inside the station looked out at her with the blank expression of someone who had learned not to notice other people's suffering. She filled the tank with trembling fingers. The rain tasted like metal and cold on her lips. She started the scooter and pointed it toward home, toward the small apartment in Little Havana where Oliver slept in his bedroom, surrounded by drawings he had made, pictures of his mother and his father, and a place that looked like heaven, because that was what a 6-year-old imagined when he drew his idea of safety. The sirens reached her first. She heard them before she saw the flames, the particular wail of emergency vehicles moving with urgency through the wet streets. Then the smell hit her: burning wood, burning plastic, burning everything she owned in the world. The smoke rose above the roofline of her building like a dark prayer, like something ancient and hungry and absolutely unstoppable. She drove faster. The ambulances had already arrived. The fire trucks were still spraying water on the flames that consumed the 3rd floor, her floor, and she saw her window, the one where she had hung Oliver's drawings with tape because she could not afford the small nails from the hardware store, and now there was nothing but orange light and the sound of glass breaking and the voices of the firefighters shouting to each other in the language of controlled chaos. She stopped the scooter 50 yards away. A police officer was checking the names on a clipboard. Speaking into a radio. Saying that all residents had been evacuated, everyone was safe. This appeared to be a criminal matter. Accelerant had been detected. The fire had started in Unit 314. Her unit. Not her unit anymore. Not anything anymore. The rain hammered against the lobby windows of the Grand Meridian Hotel like a curse that would not lift. Lena Voss stood in front of Catherine Mercer with borrowed clothes hanging off her frame, sweatpants too short, a jacket whose sleeves swallowed her hands, and tried to make herself smaller than she already was. The eviction notice trembled in her grip. Red ink. 12 days. Everything she owned in the world had burned to ash 4 hours ago, and now this woman was looking at her like she was something to be scraped off the bottom of a shoe. Catherine Mercer was the kind of beautiful that came from money, platinum blonde hair arranged in waves that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent, a white dress that fit her like it had been poured onto her body, diamonds catching the light at her throat and wrists and ears. She stood beside Richard Brennan, the hotel owner, a man whose weakness showed in the way his shoulders curved inward when Catherine spoke. "You're the nanny the agency sent." Catherine's voice dripped with disdain, each word a small blade. "You look like you crawled out of a dumpster behind a failing restaurant." Lena's throat tightened. "Mrs. Mercer, I apologize for being late. My apartment building caught fire tonight. I lost everything I owned. But I'm here now, and I can start immediately. I've worked with children for 3 years, I have excellent references, and Richard, is this who they sent?" Catherine turned to the hotel owner without waiting for Lena's explanation to finish. "A homeless woman." Richard cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "The agency performed a thorough background check. She has certifications in." "Did she also have certification in fraud?" Catherine pulled a document from her purse, the eviction notice. Lena's eviction notice. Her hands went cold. "I had someone from our security team retrieve this from your employment locker. 12-day eviction deadline. You lied on your application. You claimed to have stable housing. You're a delivery girl playing dress-up in borrowed clothes, and you probably can't even afford the bus fare home." Through the lobby glass doors, Lena could see Oliver, the 6-year-old boy she was supposed to care for, watching the scene unfold. His small face pressed against the glass. His mouth opening, closing. Crying without sound. "Please," Lena said, and the word came out fractured, like something breaking. "I have $5 in my pocket and nowhere left to go. I need this job. I'm studying criminal justice at night. I'm trying to build something better for my son. I'm not what you think I am." Catherine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "You think I don't know who you are? Derek Collins told me everything about you. About your restraining order that went absolutely nowhere. About your accusations against him. You're a liar, Lena. A troublemaker. A woman trying to destroy good men with false claims. And I will not have you contaminating my family with your problems." The words landed like fists. Derek. She knew Derek. They were connected. "Security," Catherine called out, snapping her fingers. 2 guards in dark uniforms approached from the front desk, their movements mechanical, trained. "Remove her. If she comes back on this property, call the police. Tell them she's trespassing." Lena's hand found the photograph in her jacket, the only thing she had managed to grab from her car before the fire consumed everything else. A picture of Oliver at age 3, laughing in a park that no longer existed in the same way she existed anymore. She backed toward the doors, her borrowed shoes squeaking against the marble floor. The guards flanked her, not touching, but their presence was a wall. The November rain waited on the other side of the glass. The highway. The broken scooter. Nothing. That was when the lobby went silent. It was not the silence of absence. It was the silence of presence, the kind that happens when dangerous men enter a room and everyone's nervous system recognizes threat without understanding why. Lucian Calabrese stood 15 feet away, rain soaking into a suit that cost more than Lena made in 3 months. He was tall in the way that came from deliberate posture, not just height. Dark hair silvered at the temples. Eyes the color of winter storms. A scar ran from the outside corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, thin, precise, like it had been made by something surgical rather than accidental. Beside him stood 2 men in identical dark suits. Rocco and Nino. Their shoulders broad enough to block doorways. Their faces arranged in expressions that suggested they had hurt people before and would do it again without hesitation. Catherine Mercer's face drained of color. "Mrs. Mercer," Lucian said, and his voice was deep and solid like an oath, like something that once spoken could not be taken back. I didn't realize you were part of this establishment's management. Catherine's mouth opened and closed. A small, panicked sound emerged. Mr. Calabrese. I didn't know you were staying with us. We have an excellent suite available, complimentary champagne, whatever you. I'm not staying here, Lucian interrupted. His eyes moved to Lena, and there was something in that gaze that made the entire room hold its breath. I'm hiring her. Richard Brennan took a step backward. Catherine tried to laugh, but it came out broken. I'm sorry? She's completely unsuitable. She doesn't have the references we require, she's dealing with legal issues, I don't care. Lucian's voice carried no anger, which made it infinitely more dangerous. Whatever you were paying her, I'll triple it. She starts tonight. Rocco, take her to the car. The guard named Rocco moved forward immediately, his hand extending toward Lena's elbow, not grabbing, but guiding. Protecting. Mr. Calabrese, please reconsider, Catherine stammered. This woman is a woman you were firing for being homeless. A woman you were humiliating in front of a child. A woman who showed up here desperate and you chose cruelty instead of compassion. Lucian's eyes locked onto Catherine's. I remember your face now. Derek Collins's business partner. The one who attended that casino opening 3 years ago. You wore sapphires. He paused. I'm going to remember it very clearly. He turned away from her without waiting for a response and walked toward the glass doors, water dripping from his suit onto the marble floor. Rocco guided Lena forward. Through the glass. Into the rain. Into a black SUV waiting at the curb with its engine running, exhaust rising like smoke in the cold night. The door closed behind them and the sound was final, like the closing of a vault. Inside the vehicle, the leather seat smelled like expensive tobacco and something else, something like power, concentrated and contained. Rocco sat in the driver's seat. Nino occupied the passenger side. Lena found herself in the back with Lucian Calabrese, the rain drumming on the roof above their heads, the city sliding past the windows in streaks of neon and darkness. She held the photograph of Oliver against her chest like it was a shield. Your son? Lucian asked. It was not a question inflected as one. It was a statement he was giving her permission to confirm. Oliver? 6 years old. He's in Tampa with my sister until I could. Her voice broke. She could not finish the sentence. Could not say the word afford. Could not articulate the mathematical impossibility of her own existence. Lucian did not fill the silence. He let it sit between them for 3 full minutes while the rain continued its assault against the vehicle. Then he spoke. I had a daughter. Her name was Isabella. She would have been 7 years old now. She died before she took her first breath. Lena turned to look at him, and in the orange glow of the passing streetlights, she could see something ancient and broken in his face. Grief that had calcified into something colder than mercy, but not, she realized, cruelty. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I, he said. The SUV merged onto the highway, heading toward downtown, toward the glittering towers where the wealthy stored their lives. Lucian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression, tightened. He silenced it without reading the message. The hotel, he said. You were scheduled to work there tonight. As a nanny. It was supposed to be 40 hours a week, $10 an hour. The fire. She looked down at her borrowed clothes. I had just enough savings for the deposit on my new apartment. All of it burned. The only reason I have $5 right now is because I forgot my emergency cash in my car. $5, Mr. Calabrese. That's all I have between my son and absolute nothing. What do you need? His question was simple, practical, devoid of pity. Lena almost laughed. The absurdity of the question. The impossibility of answering it. 12 days, she said. That's the eviction deadline. The building's gone, so the landlord's refunding deposits, but I still owe back rent. My son's daycare is due. I need first and last month's deposit on a new place. I need a car that works. I need. She stopped. The numbers were too large. The gap between where she was and where she needed to be was unbridgeable. Lucian stared out the window at the rain. What would it take? To rebuild? I don't know. $30,000? 40. Then here's what I'm offering you, Lucian said, and he turned to face her directly. Work for me. Manage my household. Help me remember what it's like to have life in the rooms where there's been nothing but silence for 7 years. I'll pay you $150,000 per year, and I'll give you $150,000 immediately, new apartment, 6 months paid in advance. Your son's daycare, 1 full year prepaid. A car. Your criminal justice tuition, entirely funded. Everything you need to build something. The words did not make sense in any language Lena understood. Why? She asked. Why would you do that? Because you saved my daughter, Lucian said. I've never met your daughter. No. But I kept her nursery exactly as it was the day she died. Stars painted on the ceiling she never saw. And for 7 years, I walked past that room and made a promise to myself that I would never become the kind of man who watches suffering and does nothing. 2 hours ago, I was about to break that promise. You stopped me. The car turned onto Biscayne Boulevard. Downtown Miami stretched before them, all glass and light and impossible wealth. Lucian's phone buzzed again. And again. He ignored it, his attention fixed on Lena's face. Let me help you, he said. Let me do the thing I couldn't do for my own daughter. Let me save someone. In the darkness of the vehicle, surrounded by the sound of rain and the distant hum of the city, Lena Voss, who had nothing, who had lost everything, who had been humiliated and fired and abandoned, found herself nodding yes. But what she did not know was that Derek Collins was, at that exact moment, making a phone call to Catherine Mercer from an apartment across the city. You fired her. His voice was eager, predatory. Better, Catherine said. I destroyed her. She won't testify against you. She won't testify against anyone. She's finished. The fire. Ruled accidental. My contact at the department handled it. Derek laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Good. 3 weeks until trial. Without her testimony, the securities fraud case disappears. We're safe. What Derek did not know was that Lucian Calabrese's security team had already begun compiling a file. Every restraining order. Every bribe. Every threat made against a woman Derek Collins was supposed to protect. Lena's phone buzzed in her borrowed jacket pocket. A text message arrived, the notification silent but present like a held breath. I know where you are. Lucian Calabrese can't protect you from everyone. It was from Derek. It was always from Derek. And this time, she was not alone in the darkness. The rain fell harder against the penthouse windows, and Lena Voss stood on the balcony at 2 in the morning, her borrowed nightgown soaked through, her body trembling in the November cold. Behind her, the city lights of Miami stretched like scattered diamonds across darkness. Ahead of her, nothing but the black void of the Atlantic and the sound of water crashing against invisible shores. She held her phone with both hands to keep them steady. 17 missed calls. The custody petition glowing on the screen. Screenshots of Catherine Mercer's voice, smooth and venomous, calling her a predator, a con artist, a danger to children. The rain tasted like salt and ash. Oliver was asleep inside the penthouse. Lucian was 3 blocks away at a business meeting, unaware that his world was about to collapse into rubble. Lena had thought moving into this fortress of glass and steel would save her. Instead, it had only made the trap larger. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held $5 in her pocket a month ago, the same hands that had delivered food for tips that never came, the same hands that had clutched Oliver's photograph when she had nothing else to hold on to. Those hands were shaking now, not from cold but from understanding that running had never stopped Derek Collins before, and hiding certainly wouldn't stop him now. The door to the balcony opened behind her? The sound of it, the soft mechanical hiss of the seal breaking, the whisper of heated air meeting November wind, made her close her eyes. She did not turn around. "You should not be out here," Lucian said. His voice was not angry. That was the terrible thing about him. Even when he was calculating how to destroy someone, he never sounded angry. He sounded like a man who had made a decision and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. She turned. Lucian Calabrese stood in the doorway, rain-soaked from the drive home, his expensive suit clinging to the broad expanse of his chest, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. At 38, he moved through the world like a man who had stopped being surprised by anything years ago. But his eyes were different now. Since Lena had arrived. Since Oliver had arrived. His eyes held something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Derek filed for emergency custody," Lena said. Her voice came out like paper torn in half. "He says I'm an unfit mother. He says living with you, living with a criminal, makes me unsafe. He has police protection, Lucian. Corrupt police. He told me in the school parking lot, in front of Rocco, that he knows judges, knows how to make me disappear." Lucian stepped onto the balcony. The rain soaked his already drenched coat. He did not seem to notice. "And Catherine? The gala? She's telling every person in Miami that I seduced you for money. That I'm dangerous. That I'm the kind of woman who destroys families for a man's attention." Lena's voice broke. "She did this at her charity event, Lucian. 200 people watching her call me a predator while they held champagne glasses and nodded." Lucian moved closer. His hand came up and wiped a drop of rain from her face. The gesture was so gentle, so utterly at odds with the reputation that preceded him through Miami's underworld, that Lena felt something inside her crack open. "I can't let Oliver grow up watching me hide," she whispered. "I can't let them win by making me disappear." "Then we don't hide," Lucian said. His smile was cold and certain, the smile of a man who had decided that something would end tonight. "We end them." "How?" The word came out like a plea. "You testify at the trial. You tell the truth about Derek. About what he did to you. About the fire. And I will make sure everyone listens." Lena pulled away from him. "Catherine has influence in this city. Derek has police protection. They'll bury me before I get to the courthouse." "Yes," Lucian said. "They would. Under normal circumstances." He stepped back inside, his hand extended toward her. "But these are not normal circumstances. Come inside. There is something I need to show you." The penthouse living room was dark except for the rain-gray light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Nino was waiting there, along with Rocco and 2 other men Lena had never seen before, both wearing dark suits, both holding folders thick with papers. On the glass table, dozens of documents were spread in organized rows. "Bank records," Nino said, gesturing to the first stack. His voice was rough, scarred by time and old violence. "Derek's accounts. Wire transfers from Catherine Mercer's shell companies. Payments to 3 Miami police officers. Names, dates, amounts. $270,000 paid in bribes to bury investigations into his stalking, his financial crimes, his assault of you." Rocco pointed to another folder. "The fire. We have the arson investigator who ruled it accidental. He was paid $50,000 to falsify his report. He has decided to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence." The second man opened a third folder. "Witness statements. 2 other women Derek Collins victimized in the same pattern. Both silenced by the same corrupt police. Both willing to testify." Lena sat down very slowly. The chair received her weight like a prayer answered. "How long did this take?" she asked. 48 hours, Lucian said. He was standing by the window, watching the rain. I have connections federal prosecutors respect. Evidence they can use. And I have something Derek and Catherine do not have. What? The willingness to burn everything to the ground, if necessary. He turned to face her. But we will not burn it. We will dismantle it. Piece by piece. Publicly. Completely. By the time they reach trial, they will have nothing left but the truth, and the truth will destroy them. The rain continued its assault against the glass. The sound filled the silence like a held breath. Lena thought about the fire. The eviction notice. The $5. The shame of being fired in front of a dining room full of strangers. The fear of losing Oliver to a man who saw him as a possession instead of a child. She thought about Catherine Mercer calling her a predator while 200 socialites listened and nodded. When? Lena asked. Tomorrow, Nino said. 6 in the morning. FBI raids on Derek's residence and Catherine Mercer's office simultaneously. Federal charges. Media presence. Everything recorded. Lucian walked to where Lena sat today. He extended his hand. You do not have to do this. I can end them quietly. That is the easier path. But I think you want them to know. I think you want the world to know what they did. Lena took his hand and stood. Her legs held her weight. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. Yes. I want them to know. I want everyone to know. At 6 in the morning on Thursday, November rain still falling in sheets, FBI agents in tactical gear moved on Derek Collins's house. 12 men, cameras rolling, the footage destined for every news outlet in Miami within hours. Derek was arrested in his driveway in boxer shorts and an undershirt, hands cuffed behind his back, screaming like an animal trapped in a cage. The agent in charge, a woman named Morrison with steel in her voice, read him his rights while cameras flashed and his neighbors stood on their lawns watching their neighbors' destruction captured in real time. You can't do this, Derek shouted, his face dark with rage and disbelief. I know people. I have connections. Not anymore, Agent Morrison said. Your police friends are being arrested as we speak. Bribery. Obstruction of justice. Evidence tampering. They're not your protection anymore. They're your co-conspirators. Derek collapsed to his knees on the wet driveway. His trembling began in his hands and traveled through his entire body until he was shaking like a man in the final stages of fever. Please, he whispered. I'll cooperate. I'll testify against Catherine. Just don't. Too late, Agent Morrison said, and the footage went live. 2 hours later, Catherine Mercer was escorted from the Grand Meridian Hotel in handcuffs, diamonds glittering against her wrists, her perfect composure shattered like a mirror dropped from a great height. The hotel owner, Richard Brennan, the man who had fired Lena, watched from the lobby, his face the color of ash. 20 of Catherine's socialite friends recorded the arrest on their phones, their allegiance evaporating in real time like morning dew under harsh sun. The charges came next. Securities fraud. Conspiracy to commit arson. Witness intimidation. Wire fraud. For Derek, additional charges of stalking, battery, and bribery. The case files, released to media outlets as part of the federal prosecution strategy, contained the financial records, the witness statements, the proof of the arson investigators' corruption, the damning communications between Derek and Catherine discussing their plan to destroy Lena's credibility before she could testify. By noon, the footage was everywhere. Every screen in Miami showed Derek begging. Every news app pushed the story. The evidence spread across social media like wildfire, not the rumors Catherine had seeded, but the truth, documented and undeniable, stamped with federal authority and locked in the public record forever. 1 week later, in federal courthouse, the sentences came down like judgments from another world. Derek Collins, 40 years for fraud, arson conspiracy, bribery, and stalking. Catherine Mercer, 35 years. Both begged for mercy. Both were told, in words that would appear in newspapers and be repeated on evening news broadcasts, that mercy would be too quick, too easy, too merciful compared to what they deserved. Lena sat in the courtroom gallery, her hand in Lucian's. Oliver sat behind them, safe, wearing a new blue suit that fit him perfectly. When the judge pronounced the sentences, Oliver leaned forward and whispered to Lena, "They can't hurt us now." "No," Lena said, and for the first time in months, she meant it with her entire body, not just her words. "They can't." That night, Lucian took her to the penthouse balcony again. The November rain had stopped. The sky had cleared, and the stars were visible, countless points of light reflected in the black water of the Atlantic. He held her close, his expensive coat around them both like a shield. "You were never the problem," he said. "The problem was always them. They will spend 40 years understanding that now." Lena looked up at him. Rain-wet darkness still clung to his hair. His scar caught starlight, that mark from eye to cheekbone that told the story of a man who had survived violence and transformed it into power. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Lucian said, "you graduate from your criminal justice degree. You build the life you should have always had. And Oliver grows up knowing that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that." 6 months had passed since the sentences fell like thunder in the courtroom, and the penthouse was quiet in a way it had never been before. Lena Voss stood at the edge of the stage in the university auditorium, her graduation gown draped over shoulders that no longer carried the weight of desperation. Her name was called. Lena Marie Voss. Top of her class. Criminal justice degree. Her hands trembled as she walked across the stage, and she saw them in the audience, Lucian in the third row, his dark suit pressed to perfection, and beside him Oliver in a navy blazer 2 sizes too big because he had insisted on looking like a businessman. The boy held a sign above his head, handmade with construction paper and glitter that caught the auditorium lights. It said, "My mom is a lawyer." Not yet. But soon. She had been accepted to law school with a full scholarship. Full. For years of tuition, books, living expenses, erased. The acceptance letter sat on her kitchen table, still in its envelope, because some gifts were so enormous they required time to believe they were real. Lucian did not clap like the other parents. He sat very still, watching her cross the stage with an expression that had no name, and when she looked directly at him, he nodded once, a gesture so small it could have been nothing. But Marco, standing beside him with Rocco and Nino, leaned close and whispered something that made Lucian's jaw tighten. The younger man had never seen his boss weep. Not once in 15 years. But something in Lucian's eyes reflected light in a way that suggested tears were being held back with the same discipline he applied to everything else in his life. That evening, in the penthouse, Lena stood in the hallway outside Isabella's nursery. The door was open. The room had changed. Gone were the expensive crib and the hand-embroidered blankets. Gone was the sterile perfection Lucian had maintained for years like a tomb. The furniture had been donated to Miami Children's Hospital, where 12 cribs now bore the name Isabella Calabrese Memorial Fund in small brass plates. But the ceiling remained, still painted with stars, still glowing softly in the dimming light. And on the dresser, a single photograph in a silver frame, a newborn girl with her father's dark eyes, sleeping against his chest. "You were right," Lucian said behind her. Lena turned. He stood in the doorway wearing only a dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he looked vulnerable in a way that contradicted everything about him. "About what?" she asked. "She existed," he said quietly. "She mattered. She still matters. But I was already dead, and I was choosing to stay that way." He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. "You're still here, Lucian. You're allowed to live. That's what you told me. I remember. I didn't believe you." He looked at the photograph, at his daughter's impossible smallness in his arms. "I believed that loss was payment. That I owed the world my suffering because she could not suffer anymore." He turned to face Lena. "But you kept living anyway. Even when you had $5 and nowhere to go. You kept moving forward. So I decided to try. That week, the Isabella Calabrese Foundation held its first board meeting in an office above a grocery store in Wynwood. The foundation's purpose was explicit and absolute: housing assistance for single mothers escaping domestic violence. No applications rejected based on criminal background. No waiting lists. If a woman had been abused and was ready to rebuild, the foundation would provide first month's rent, security deposit, and furniture for a year. No strings. No gratitude required. No debt. Lena ran the foundation. Her official title was executive director, which meant she spent 12 hours a day on the phone with landlords, meeting with survivors, reviewing cases, and pushing back against anyone who suggested that mercy needed qualification. Lucian attended the meetings but rarely spoke. He sat in the back with Rocco and Nino, listening, and occasionally he would catch Lena's eye and nod. One of the women they helped was named Sophia. She had 2 children and $17 to her name when she walked into the office, her left eye purple and swollen shut. She had left her husband at 3 in the morning with nothing but the clothes on her bodies. The foundation found her apartment in a safe neighborhood. They furnished it. They connected her with a job training program. Within 6 weeks, she was working as a medical assistant. Within 6 months, she had never looked back. She came to the office to thank Lena, and she saw the building security footage later, a young woman hugging Lena so hard both of them cried, and Lucian standing near the window, watching, with something in his chest that felt like the return of a heartbeat he thought had stopped forever. 3 weeks later, Lena returned to the diner where she used to study at 3 in the morning. The booth in the back corner was empty. It was Wednesday at 11 p.m., and the place was mostly dead, just tired truckers nursing black coffee and a couple of insomniacs staring at their phones. Marlene, the waitress with the pink name tag and the face of someone who had worked double shifts since before Lena was born, nearly dropped her coffee pot when she recognized her. "Oh my God. Oh my God, honey." Marlene set down the pot and rushed over, her worn hands reaching for Lena's face. "I saw you on the news. The federal courthouse. You took down Derek Collins and Catherine Mercer. You're a hero." "I'm just someone who refused to disappear," Lena said quietly. She slid into the booth, her old booth, where she had read criminal procedure at 3 in the morning with a 17-cent cup of coffee and a borrowed textbook. Lucian sat across from her, and he ordered black coffee, and for the next 2 hours, they sat in that vinyl booth talking about law school and Oliver's soccer team and the foundation's first permanent housing complex opening next month in Little Haiti. "Marlene keeps checking on us," Lena whispered, glancing toward the counter. "Let her," Lucian said. "Kindness is rarer than money. She recognizes it when she sees it." They left at 1 in the morning. The rain had finally stopped. The Miami sky had cleared, and the stars were visible, countless points of light reflecting in the black water that stretched toward the Atlantic. Marlene watched them leave, watched Lucian open the passenger door of his black SUV for Lena, watched them drive away, and she called her sister and said, "I just watched a miracle walk out of my diner." 3 weeks after the law school acceptance, on a night when October rain began to fall again, Lucian took Lena to the rooftop of the penthouse. The city spread below them like a circuit board of light and movement. He wore an expensive black coat that cost more than Lena's first apartment. She wore a sweater he had given her, cream-colored cashmere, and she stood close enough to him that their shoulders almost touched. "Oliver asked me something last week," she said. "What did he ask?" "He said, 'Is Mr. Calabrese staying for dinner?' And I realized that I didn't know how to answer him. I didn't know what this was. What we are." Lucian was quiet for a long time. The rain fell around them, cold and steady, and he did not pull her close or make a grand gesture. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and removed a small box, and he opened it to reveal a ring, platinum, a single diamond, simple and enormous and real. "I love you," he said, and his voice was like thunder, like stone, like a man speaking a truth he had protected from himself for months. "I love you because you survived when survival made no sense. I love you because you looked at a grieving man and saw something worth saving. I love you because you showed Oliver that the world has people in it who choose mercy when they could choose cruelty. He looked at her directly. Will you marry me? Not someday. Now. This week. Lena's hands covered her mouth. Tears spilled down her face, not tears of sadness, but tears of a woman who had been told she was nobody, that her voice didn't matter, that powerful people would always win, and who had lived long enough to prove every single one of those lies. Yes, she said. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and it caught the city lights, and for a moment, the rain paused, and the sky cleared, and there was nothing in the world but two people who had saved each other from the darkness they carried. 3 days later, Rocco and Nino stood in the penthouse living room, and their boss knelt in front of Oliver. The boy was 7 years old, and he had been taught by life to be suspicious of kindness. But Lucian held out a small wrapped box, and he said, "Your mother has agreed to marry me. And I would like to ask your permission." Oliver took the box with shaking hands. Inside was a watch, gold, expensive, sized for a child, and Lucian said, "This belonged to my grandfather. He was a man of honor. I never knew him, but I want you to know that I have tried to be the kind of man he would have respected. Will you let me try to be the kind of father that you deserve?" Oliver did not answer with words. He threw his arms around Lucian's neck, and he cried, and Lucian held him with the same care he would have held Isabella if she had lived long enough to know him. Rocco turned away quickly. Nino cleared his throat. Neither man had ever seen their boss cry, but they could hear the sound of breathing that belonged to a man being born again. The wedding was held in November, on the same day of the month that Lena had stood in the rain with $5 in her pocket and nowhere left to go. They married in a small ceremony in the botanical garden, just family and the men who had become like brothers to Lucian over 15 years of blood and loyalty. Oliver walked Lena down the aisle because there was no father left to do it, and he was the most important man in her life besides one. Lena wore white. She was 28 years old, and she looked like a woman who had been broken and had chosen to rebuild herself, and Lucian stood at the altar wearing a suit that cost $10,000, and when he saw her walking toward him, something in his chest that had been frozen for years finally thawed. They said their vows without tears, without performance, with the simple clarity of two people who had been to the edge of destruction and had pulled each other back. Lucian placed the ring on her finger, and he said, "You came to me on the worst night of your life, and I did not know that night would become the first day of everything good that followed." That winter, the Isabella Calabrese Foundation opened its first permanent housing complex in Little Haiti, 12 units of fully furnished apartments, and Lena cut the ribbon at the ceremony. She stood in front of survivors and advocates and reporters, and she said, "6 months ago, I had $5 in my pocket and nowhere left to go. I was told I was nobody, that my voice didn't matter, that powerful people would always win. But I learned something that changed my life. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that." The crowd was silent. Not romance, not fairy tales, but love as action. Love as showing up when someone has nothing left. Lucian Calabrese showed up for me when I believed I was invisible. That's what we're building here, a place where women who have lost everything can find proof that their lives matter. That they're worth saving. That darkness doesn't have the final word. Lucian stood in the crowd, watching her with unguarded pride, and Rocco leaned close and said, "She changed everything, boss." "Yes," Lucian said quietly. "She did." This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.